Welcome back to the Phil Rosenberg Show. I am your host, Philip Rosenberg. So, I've got a question for you. What do the following things have in common? Military training, pornography, high theater, overseas adventures, and zombie killing. If you guess that each of these things can be done with incredible realness via the use of virtual reality and/or augmented reality, you would be the winner of the grand prize. Now, our guest this evening is an award-winning filmmaker who specializes in both augmented and virtual reality productions. Manu Jain has had his work featured in over a dozen film festivals where he's received worldwide acclaim for his efforts. Manu may be best known for his piece Seen Clearly, which was his first notable combined work of VR and film. Thank you very much, Manu, for joining me this evening. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So I have to admit, I am absurdly fascinated by this topic and the potential that it has to affect so much of our lives. So let me just start by asking you the basic thing. Can you give us a description of both virtual reality and augmented reality? And importantly, let's just talk a little bit about the difference between them so that there's no confusion, because they are separate individual things.
Yeah, for sure. Would be happy to. So virtual reality is something where you actually as a user, get brought to imagine an entirely different world. You get put into this completely different reality. It can be live action shot. It can be produced through computer graphics, but you're in a completely different world. And within that virtual reality, there's a couple different ways it can happen. It can be what's considered 360 VR, where when you're brought to that world, you can look in all directions, but you're in a standstill position. Or it can be room scale VR, which, believe it or not, you can be put into the separate world and actually move, walk around, bend, and it feels like reality. Like it uses all the regular rules. It's a pretty incredible experience as you're being put into a reality that's completely separate from your own. Augmented reality, on the other hand, what it does is it brings you you're still in your natural world, but it layers things into that world. So, for example, if you're in your living room and you can potentially bring in a Star Wars character, you can bring in all sorts of different things. You can bring in, if you're watching TV, you can throw a screen onto your wall. So it layers things into your natural world, but the natural world is still what you can see underneath it all.
So it's more like a harmony, like layers of reality, as opposed to a completely different. So you can be in a room. It sounds like virtual reality. You can be in a room, and what's in that room is almost not relevant to what you're seeing, right? It's just a completely new, made-up thing. And augmented reality is like you take the thing you're looking at and you add layers of other stuff, whether it's a character or maybe colors or birds or whatever. Am I close?
Entirely correct. Yep,
Oh,
that's
good,
exactly right. And so
good.
you can be adding images, you can be adding sounds, but you'll still be seeing your world underneath it.
Right. Okay, so you mentioned being able to sort of be in a room and have the whole room become the reality, a new reality, not what's in the room. So this, of course, if you're a Star Trek fan and you hear the words virtual reality, you immediately harken back to something called the Holodeck. Now, I guess it's too late. I can't hide the fact that I'm a bit of a Trekkie, kind of a nerd that way. And I think about that, and I've always wondered, is such a thing possible? Is a static sized room that, through effects, we can be in a completely different place and have like a brand new narrative created around us? Is that possible now, something that advanced?
It's pretty close to being there. So right now, the limitations are on the computing end. So there's only so much that the computing for VR can put you in. So
Yeah.
imagine, when you hear these terms like HD, 2K, 4K,
Yeah.
it can go up to with VR, it can go up to 8K and beyond. But when you get beyond that, obviously the computing gets a little bit more staggered. That's really the limitation. But otherwise, once that catches up, you're there. You would feel like you're completely in this separate world.
So let's bring two cutting edge technologies together for a second in our imaginations. Let's combine VR with quantum computing, right? The power of quantum computing, the amount of information that can travel quickly, much more quickly, orders of magnitude more quickly and efficiently using quantum computing versus the normal sort, seems like more or less what you're describing would be needed to get to the holodeck experience from Star Trek. Is that how far away?
We're even closer than that. I mean, when you're talking about quantum computing, that's basically we're getting into the matrix at that point.
What do you mean? What do you mean the Matrix? Do you mean from the movie The
Like
Matrix?
the movie The Matrix, like you're basically in this completely separate reality where it's such high fidelity that you wouldn't, you might not even know that it's not your reality.
This isn't real.
So this leads me to a thought that uh, if I can control the perception of someone else's reality, how much power does that give me over that person? If they like, if I can get someone to sit down or be in a room and experience the reality that I've programmed in, I mean, can I not condition that person? Can I use that for, we talked at the top of the show a little bit, I mentioned military training. Can you simulate combat experience using VR?
You definitely can. And so on the positive end of that, a lot of VR is actually being used for people that come back from combat to deal with some of their PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
so things like that. But you're entirely right. It can be used for all sorts of different training. It has a real power to tug in a lot of what's going on in your brain mentally, of your perception of what's happening. It puts you in a completely different way than what you've experienced with things like TV. It actually feels like things are happening. As much as sometimes you know you're within a headset at first, you start to lose that grasp pretty quick. So it tugs on different parts of you that I think no other technology has really tugged on yet.
So I would think that VR and AR could be incredibly useful to manage, to help manage this experience that we're in right now. What do you think? Can VR forward the lifestyle, the happiness quotient of the average person who's stuck at home?
Like I think people have been proven to be really adaptive, but you're dealing with these flat screens, and what we're kind of dealing with right now, we have these frames, right, where you have your head positioned a certain way, but that's not reality. When you're hanging out with people, you're able to turn to your left, turn to your right, see full bodies, like it's a full room or whatever your environment is. Virtual reality can put you in a place where you can be across someone, next to someone. You can hear the person a little bit louder that's next to you versus across the room. It's those type of things that I think can really make you feel like you're together when you're not. That these experiences with like Skype and Zoom and basically this video chatting, while they're really great, they're really fantastic, but that's what's holding us back a little bit. Whereas I think those things like virtual reality and augmented reality can really push that forward.
So interesting. So what in terms of technology, so you're really on the cutting edge, right? So what is coming down the pike? What is like almost there but not there yet that we can look forward to in terms of VR and AR?
So VR, we're getting closer and closer to where all you really need is just the headset. A year ago, even a couple of years ago, like you needed to have wires that connected from a laptop to your headset. You don't really need that anymore. That what we were talking about at first with the computing chip inside the VR headset getting stronger and stronger every few months that goes by. It's reached a point now also where before you needed controllers, it's starting to actually just track your hands. So your need for all sorts of different equipment is lessening. So your ability to feel completely immersed in these virtual worlds is getting higher and higher and higher.
The project, I just want to say the project that I find most interesting of yours is the latest one, as far as I know, the latest project that you've done concerned with Kung Fu. So the film's called Kung Fu film. Oh no, the film is called Balance, a Kung Fu VR experience, right? I want to just tell me a little bit about the film, and then I want to ask you like what was most challenging about it.
Yeah. So the film, what the beauty of this film is, you're talking about all these like kung fu experiences that you had growing up with these different films. What me and my producing partner Ellen Oppenheim, what we wanted to do with this film was bring people to the center of
I'm sorry, Ellen who?
Ellen Oppenheim.
Oppenheim. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. We wanted to bring people to the center of this action. So when you see something like Karate Kid, for example, imagine being in the middle of that spar. That's what we wanted to bring for people. So
Nice.
when people were actually having a competition in a tournament, you're there. You actually you see those kicks, you see those punches. Feels like you're in the center of all this happening. You have a front row seat to see these immense, crazy competitors, and sometimes you're actually feeling like you're getting sparred against, like you are the punching bag. Something like this gives you an immersion that we believe is like nothing you can ever experience with something like martial arts before. And with some, when you see these things through the TV, you get to experience the beauty and all that, but through this you get to see the majesty of it, the athleticism, the endurance. Like it just pops through because it's in full 360 degrees.
Let's touch on something a little bit controversial now. What if I were a serial killer or a pedophile or a rapist or someone who commits crimes, whatever kind of crime, but instead of going out into the world and committing that crime, maybe instead I want to just have the experience virtually? What do you think about the efficacy of that? Is there a moral question or an ethical question? Should I be able to commit a crime using VR, do you think, or is that just a bridge too far?
I mean, I feel like it's one of those things that gets brought up almost, I feel like, anytime a new technological advancement happens. So with gaming, for example, you can shoot people all day long. You could, like, Grand Theft Auto, you can be performing all sorts of different crimes. I don't think that necessarily meant that it created a whole new breed of criminals, but maybe some criminals that would have been acting in real life got to act it out in like a virtual experience. So yeah, it could allow for that, but I'm not sure if it would mean that it would create an avenue for allowing these people to experience that without doing it in real life.
Manu, it's been a pleasure talking to you this evening. Really, one of the most interesting interviews I've ever done. And the technology is moving so fast that it's going to be very easy for us to have a brand new conversation in only 6 months. I hope you'll come back in 6 months and we can talk about what's changed and then what's down the pike from that point onwards.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. It's a pleasure chatting with you.
My pleasure. Thanks again for coming on tonight. And folks, have a wonderful evening.